So good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all here in the Zendo, and those of you online. I'm going to read a quote here. Until you realize that this shore where you stand, this life that you are living, and the other shore, the life of the Buddhas, are the same shore, you cannot appreciate your life to the fullest. Those are words of Taizan Maezumi, Zen teacher. Seems to me, based on my experience and observation, that when we come to practice, most of us, when we come through the door of the Zendo, we do so because we're trying to grapple with the suffering in our life. The starting point for the Buddhist framework of the Four Noble Truths is that point also, that our life is suffering, our life is marked by suffering. That's a starting point. Actually, in Sanskrit, the term for it is dukkha, which, as Roshi and others have pointed out, a better translation for the term than suffering might be dissatisfaction. So sometimes it may feel very dramatic. Sometimes it may feel very subtle. So maybe suffering sounds more right to you, or maybe dissatisfaction. But when we have some kind of suffering or dissatisfaction, as we all do, in one way or another, there are different ways that we can try to deal with it. So we might, for example, think that if I can just get some more money, I'll be able to solve the problems. Or maybe we think if I can just find the right relationship, a partner or lover, or the right sex life, maybe that will solve my problems. Or maybe we think, I just have to go somewhere else. If I'm someplace else, my problems will go away. All of these are familiar approaches, and they all involve looking outside ourselves to grapple with the problem of suffering or dissatisfaction. So then some of us try a different approach, and that is to not look outside ourselves, but to look at our own life and at our own mind, at our own heart. So we might come to religion then, or to a spiritual tradition like Zen. We might think that if we just have God, then it'll all be okay. If we have a congregation, a group of spiritual friends, that will solve the problem. Or a teacher, that will solve the problem. And for the people who take that step and come to a Zen center, what I see is that oftentimes when they start out, there's a kind of frisson, an excitement, something exotic, or there's curiosity, there's maybe something special that they experience. But after a certain time, the sheen starts to wear off. And it's no longer quite so exciting. It's starting to get kind of ordinary, or maybe boring, or maybe they start to see their suffering again. And so many people at that point decide, this isn't really working. I've got to try something else. And they let it go. and they move on to something else. And I hope that something else works for them. But it's always, I always feel it's a shame when that happens, because it's actually just when the sheen starts to wear off that the practice is beginning to ripen and mature. It's just when things become more ordinary, more real, and we really start to see ourselves and our suffering, that the practice is deepening. But then even for those who stick around at that point, there's still, for a long time, often a sense that I'm doing this practice, but it's still not providing the fulfillment that I'm looking to overcome my suffering and dissatisfaction. So maybe it's because they've heard or read about some great experience that they should have through practice. Maybe they've had an experience themselves and they think, I have to get back to what that was. Or maybe they see another Zen practitioner or a teacher and they think, well, that's what I want to be like. And so there continues to be a kind of duality that persists and that continues to produce a sense of lack of fulfillment, dissatisfaction, and the suffering continues. So Maezumi Roshi talked about this in terms of a separation between yourself and Buddha, or between yourself and your true self. Or as he put it, a gap between yourself and yourself. So Maezumi Roshi said, and this is one of the points of his teaching that I wanted to bring up tonight, that the point of practice is to try to narrow the gap between yourself and Buddha. So just to take a little break here and say a few words about Maezumi Roshi. Maezumi Roshi, for those who don't know of him, I wanted to highlight is someone who's very important for us here at Village Zendo. Maezumi Roshi was a Japanese priest who came to the United States, I believe, in 1956. And he came to minister to the Japanese population in Los Angeles. And after a while, by the early 60s, he started to have more and more young, kind of countercultural, maybe bohemian Westerners coming to him and asking him about Zen and asking about meditation. And so he started working with them. And in the end, he ended up devoting all of his time and all of his life to working with these Westerners. He founded the Zen Center of Los Angeles in 1967. And he founded a monastery in the mountains outside of Los Angeles, the Zen Mountain Center, in 1967. He was a powerful teacher. He had something like a dozen Dharma heirs, people who would go on and end up teaching themselves and themselves have Dharma heirs. So very widespread influence in the United States, in Europe, even in Mexico. Clearly a powerful teacher, but also a man who was himself deeply flawed and who had his own struggles with his own suffering and his own dissatisfaction. I'm not going to say much more about his biography here because I know we'll be hearing about Maezumi Roshi in future talks that are coming up. But back to the question. The question is, how can we narrow the gap between yourself, ourselves, and Buddha? Maezumi Roshi said, actually, the problem is to realize that there is no gap. Not to narrow the gap, but to realize there is no gap. But how can we do that? So here is a second important point of his teaching that I wanted to emphasize. Maezumi Roshi would say again and again, appreciate your life. Appreciate your life. So I think, I heard once there was an Asian teacher who came to the United States who said that after working with students in this country, he said he was struck by how much self-loathing he found amongst the students he met. And so I think Maezumi Roshi, in a way, was encouraging us to appreciate ourselves and to get beyond the sense of shame that we may feel about ourselves, the sense that the lack of self-worth, the sense that we are insufficient, the sense that our imperfections and limitations are an insuperable obstacle for ourselves. And so he was encouraging us to appreciate our lives in all of their uniqueness, distinctiveness, in all of their idiosyncrasy, in all of their complexity, as well as their simplicity, in all of the hardships that we face, the difficulties as well as the delights, the joys as well as the sorrows. Can we really appreciate our life, including all of those things? I don't think that this was just a kind of feel-good message, a kind of, let's say, spiritual pat on the back. You're okay. It is, in a way, an affirmation of the self. But I think it's also beyond any superficial judgment about my life is good or bad. Appreciate our life, I think, is to be aware of ourselves as we really are with all of the features of our life, however we may judge them. The complexity, the difficulty, the idiosyncrasy, and the struggles. Maezumi Roshi himself was not immune to these difficulties and struggles. He wrote to one of his students, I'm sorry to hear that your car is broken down. As for me, I've just about broken down myself. And he also said to her one time, I feel tired all the time. I'm hurting all the time. I think that we can go even further with appreciate your life. To be aware as well of the way in which our lives are constantly changing. Whether we like it or not, our lives are constantly in flux. From one moment to the next, one day to the next. They're changing with all of the circumstances of our lives, all of our relationships with others, all of the situations we find ourselves in. So that there's actually no fixed self at all. No identity that we can count on as being there intrinsically, permanently, and independently of everything and everyone else, whether we like it or not. So this is, if there's one side to appreciate your life that is, in a way, affirming the self, there's another side which is asking, what is the self? Who am I? What is my life? And not leaving us with anything to hang on to. That our life is empty of any essential nature. There is, in the deeper sense, no self. And so appreciate our life can reflect both sides of the story, which are both sides of the same reality. The complexity, the difficulty of the self, and the constant change and interdependency of no self. Our singularity and our equality with everyone else, because we are all equally interrelated and changing. The phenomenal side of our life and the universal side of our life. Universal because we are in connection with everyone and everything else. So there's a story that, a beautiful story that Enkyo Roshi has told about an experience she had with Maezumi Roshi. I'm a little embarrassed to tell her story, but she hasn't told this story for a long time, so I'm going to take the liberty of telling that story here. So Maezumi Roshi, I didn't finish saying why he's so important to us, but Maezumi Roshi was Enkyo Roshi's teacher for many years. He ordained her. She was slated to receive Dharma transmission from him. That didn't happen because he died unexpectedly. And so she ended up receiving Dharma transmission from Maezumi Roshi's first successor, who was Bernie Glassman. So all of the Village Zendo teachers, in a way, have been stamped by the teaching of Maezumi Roshi and influenced by Maezumi Roshi. So for many years, Roshi was traveling to Los Angeles and going in the summers to Zen Mountain Center. And on one occasion, they were about to hold a memorial service. And Roshi was the Chiden. The Chiden has the service position of caring for the altar. And so right before the memorial service, she was rushing to carry the lacquered wooden cups that are put on the altar for the memorial service to feed the Buddha and to feed the hungry ghosts. And as she was rushing to the hall, she accidentally dropped the cup, and it fell off the deck down below onto some rocks. And when she went down to get it, she saw that in this beautiful lacquered cup, there was now this gash. And the dark red wood was showing through. And she was very chagrined, and she went to Maezumi Roshi, crestfallen. She said, "I'm so sorry, Roshi. I promise I'm going to buy a new one and have it sent from Japan to replace this." And he said, "Enkyo, why? Why? The chip gives it more value. See, just as it is." So we all have our chips and our cracks and our broken pieces. Maezumi Roshi had them. Enkyo Roshi has them. I have them. You have them. We all have those parts that we see as our flaws, our imperfections, the chips in our surface. And the point of our practice is not to cover them up, it's rather to see ourselves and express ourselves as we are, with all of those, with all of that texture, even if it's the result of painful experiences. That is also the beauty of our life, and the value of our life is found in those chips and cracks and gashes. So let's not think of our practice as trying to achieve this perfect lacquered look, but to see ourselves as we really are and not be afraid to express ourselves as we really are, as the result of all the karma throughout our life. This isn't something that we can do just because at some point we'll have an experience that will be a turning point, and forever after we'll realize that our life is the life of the Buddha. Because this is what it is to appreciate our life. It's to appreciate our life as the life of the Buddha, in all of our individuality and also in our equality and universality, in interconnection with everyone and everything else. To see our life as the life of the Buddha. This is something that we have to do again and again and again, moment to moment to moment. Therein lies our practice. Appreciate your life. See, just as it is. Thank you.